Hello, and thank you for watching the A&I Solutions webcast replay on CA Clarity Project and Portfolio Management, co-hosted by CA Technologies. My name is Becky Bailey, and I'm the Business Communications Manager at A&I Solutions. If you do not know us, A&I Solutions is a services provider and software reseller that was founded almost 15 years ago in 1999. Primarily, we focus on solutions by CA Technologies. Since 2004, A&I Solutions has been a strategic North American services partner of CA Technologies. Backed by the support of our partnership and experienced services team, we have become a leading provider in enterprise solutions dedicated to delivering dependable products through excellent people at a fair value. At this time, I would like to introduce today's guest speaker, Jason Kotlinski, Senior Principal Consultant at CA Technologies.
What we're going to be covering today, and we have a wide range of things within the agenda today, but we're really going to start focusing on why clarity. What do we do from a CA Technologies perspective to make us a market leader in the PPM industry? From there, we're going to talk a little bit about project governance and how you can leverage clarity and how our existing customers leverage clarity to really start driving strategy, ranking and executing on projects that align to those strategies, being able to collect time and statuses from a mobility perspective, as well as confirming that status with portlets and reports that stream not only to your project managers, your team members, and portfolio owners, as well as all the way up to the executive level. Okay? And then finally, we're going to wrap up with how this is all actually delivered to the consumer base and throughout the industry through our worldwide leading services organization. Okay, so why clarity? Well, if we look at the numbers, and it really ranges from a couple of things. So from a clarity business unit perspective, we have over 550 people strong throughout the world. And typically what we see here is that the majority of these individuals are located in our development and research and development departments. So what we are doing from an aspect of development within the solution is taking all of our customer feedback through the user communities and driving new functionality, features, and reports throughout the application. With this comes 30 years of best practice accelerators that provide quick ROIs to organizations that use tools such as Clarity to really start driving reports out of the box, to establish not only governance and best practice around your methodologies, but as well as being able to provide collaboration interfaces where you can share and develop deliverables internally. Some of that goes into integrations, and I'm going to get into that in a second here. But ultimately, we have, from a membership perspective, over 1,000 some customers that use Clarity globally, which automatically feeds into key user groups across the nation that really meet on a quarterly basis to not only discuss best practice within the Clarity solution, but as well as ideas throughout their PMI industry. With that, and we're going to get into how it's delivered, Clarity is a 9-year leader within the Gartner Magic Quadrant. We also rank very highly in the Forrester Waves that you may see out there. And from a services perspective, the majority of our architects and also the delivery mechanisms that we utilize really rolls up through that 30 years of experience in best practice. So through our partnerships and whatnot, we are able to deliver a very quick ROI model to the organizations that use Clarity, as well as being able to support on a daily basis any of the initiatives that you want to partake from an opportunity perspective within the Clarity suite. So going to the MarketScope with Gartner, we were rated as a strong positive, which is the highest rating that they provide. This really starts to go into where we are going as a solution. So, not only has the solution that we've had from a Clarity perspective been in the leader quadrant for 9 years before Gartner moved over to this MarketScope, we are really driving strategy and industry best practice through the new functionality that we are delivering with our new versions. And I'm going to discuss the new versions a little later in this webinar. But ultimately, from a market leadership perspective, Clarity is really steering that car. We are now focusing more on mobility, so enabling users to utilize their iPads and iPhones to do their daily jobs within a Clarity function, and ultimately driving more and more consistency throughout the solution to enable better user adoption as well as integrations throughout the solution. Okay. From an integration standpoint, we have hundreds of integrations with ERP systems. With that, we are talking about Oracle, SAP, PeopleSoft. Again, you guys can read slides. As well as other homegrown systems and other applications. The great thing about Clarity and the users that I work with on a daily basis and the customers that I talk to throughout the country is that there is always some type of application out there that you are going to want to feed a PPM solution with. So whether it be a costing perspective, whether it be just getting your resource into the tool, Clarity provides out-of-the-box connectors to deliver that connection point from an API perspective. So we have not seen, again, I will never say that there's not some one-off applications or legacy systems that we cannot integrate with, but from what the customers I deal with on a daily basis, we have not seen really any application or database that we can't drive data out of. And the rule of thumb there is typically, as long as we can get the information out of that application that you are referencing, Clarity can actually ingest that on a scheduled basis or a one-off at implementation. With that also becomes user management. So as I said before, maybe a PeopleSoft HR system. We do have LDAP integrations and Active Directory integrations. There is out-of-the-box connectors to Microsoft projects. So for those individuals within organizations that are harboring a PM that still likes to use Microsoft Office or Microsoft Project as their main scheduling solution, we can still enable that to happen. So from a training perspective, those PMs can still function in Microsoft Project, do their daily scheduling, add and supply resources and auto schedule as they seem fit. But ultimately, instead of saving to their desktop or network share folder, they're literally saying save to Clarity. At which point, Clarity is automatically updated. So all those reports and key definitions that are being rolled up to the executive level, whether it be in our portlets or reports, will automatically be real-time supplied to those individuals. Okay. As well as being able to support ALM integrations. So when we're talking about application lifecycle management, quality centers, help desk centers, all those tickets can actually be populated in the Clarity using our TaskTop integration from a platform perspective. Okay. With that integrations comes, well, what does Clarity truly do? And how do we supply governance to an organization? One thing I always like to say before I start talking about this slide, because it looks very robust, is that Clarity is scalable. So we're going to touch on this a little bit on how it's delivered at the end of this presentation. But really what it comes down to is what your needs are as an organization. So if you are truly focused on just getting a viewpoint into what your resources are working on and how much time they are spending on those projects, and you're not really concerned about financial management at this point, just from a maturity perspective, you can do that. So it's literally flipping on switches throughout the application to establish and determine which functionality you want to use. And typically customers I work with follow that exact methodology. It's a crawl, walk, run approach where they are going in, establishing quick wins that will automatically roll up to the executive levels from a reporting standpoint. And then ultimately, as they progress through the maturity cycle of utilizing this solution, and as they progress through a maturity cycle of their own project management and portfolio management capabilities, they will then roll off additional functionality to the user community as they see fit. But what Clarity truly gives you is a holistic one source of truth for all the information that you are storing, whether it be in IT, whether it be in a new product development world, whether it be in a professional services automation perspective. I have a customer that's looking at it from a marketing perspective, real estate management perspective. Clarity is a platform to really enable all of that information to be stored in one location and then ultimately report and execute on that. So what do we offer? Really from a life cycle management perspective, we provide an interface to gather in all that incoming demand. So whether it be coming from your customers for upgrades of a solution or managing an application, If it's coming from a new product development where you're initiating a new request for a new product with market analysis associated to that, Clarity can ingest all that incoming demand. And ultimately, what that allows you to do with not only defining those requirements and business case around those ideas, is it allows you to start putting that in context around your current in-flight work in your current portfolios. So if we are funding your portfolio for a specific line of business, and we are at $50 million as it sits today, we have 11 in-flight projects that are equating to $45 million. If I'm looking at all that incoming demand, how will that reflect against my overall budget? Do I need to push out projects? Do I need to reprioritize what we are doing from a strategic standpoint, from the executive level management? And again, from idea to portfolio, and then ultimately to project execution. So after that ranking has occurred within your portfolio around incoming demand versus in-flight work, based on your constraints and optimizations, whether that's estimated cost and effort, goals, business alignment scores, risk factor scoring, we enable you as a PM to execute on that project based on whatever methodology you're using. So if that's a typical waterfall approach that your organization is utilizing, standard out-of-the-box Clarity functionality, right? Being able to do a step-by-step approach to phase gating, where you're able to do gate checks, reviews, required deliverables, and milestone tracking. If you're looking at it from an agile perspective, what we're seeing in the market today is that, and what the market is really saying, is that 80% of the organizations are going to have some type of agile team working within their organization. Clarity also supports that. So when we're talking about individuals from a development standpoint, utilizing virtual walls, burn down charts, velocity metrics, sprint controls, and release controls, that's all tied into now an execution model that they're utilizing and used to utilizing within their own development team. Not listed on this slide, but it's definitely important to say is we also support Kanban boards. So if you have agile teams that are working in a purely sprint-based virtual wall perspective, but also have a couple agile teams that are doing Kanban board support, those teams can actually work on there. Now, the nice thing about this in talking about a holistic approach is that all these projects that are being executed, whether they be in waterfall or agile, or that typical agile but stage where there's a little bit of waterfall and a little bit of agile, Clarity now allows you to combine all of that information into your portfolios, and from a reporting perspective, being able to get a true cost of ownership across your organization, regardless of what type of execution model that you're working with. That is a big difference as opposed to utilizing an agile solution that has no ties to any reporting structure that you have, and ultimately having to create or have resources that are supplying reports on a weekly or quarterly basis. And obviously, if there was a mechanism that you can roll that all up into one solution and get reports out of the box that streams across both execution models, why not utilize that? I have a customer that actually was having 3 FTEs on a quarterly basis, generating reports out of their Agile system and Clarity. They weren't using Clarity from an Agile perspective at this point in time. What they have done is actually migrated over into Clarity from an Agile perspective, and now those 3 FTEs are able to focus their priority and production or productivity to other more important things. So they're no longer spending 3 days every quarter actually creating those reports, we're making ties to all these different applications. Instead, now it's housed in one environment where both the waterfall teams and agile teams are able to execute on their projects as they see fit, using the methodologies that are important to them. And ultimately, Clarity is now that one source of truth where all that reporting is coming out. Okay? And in doing that, Clarity provides roughly 30 out-of-the-box business objects reports, crystal reports, as well as over 100 plus portlets that will help generate this execution model, as well as this reporting statuses to the given executive level management, as well as the portfolio teams and PMs. Okay. So how do we start driving user adoption? So it's great that we can deliver all this holistic methodology approach and best practice within one solution, and I can get all my reports out of it, well, how are people going to be trained and start utilizing it? Well, Clarity also provides CAPA. It's short for CA Productivity Accelerator. And what this truly is that one-off kind of person looking over your shoulder to help you utilize the solution. What we've seen is that roughly 75% of those level 1 service calls to help desks have actually gone away with customers that are using CAPA. Because what this enables you to do is any point where you are in the application utilizing the solution, it is intuitive enough when you click that help button to know where you are in the application, to start giving you relevant data that enables you to not only see it, try it, and know it, but also really enable you as an end user to execute on your own issues and be able to utilize the solution appropriately. Very quickly, I'll just describe what these are. So See It mode really gives you a dummy screen. It's a pre-recording, and it's a dummy screen that leads you through your solution step by step. So if I'm trying to create a project, well, how do I do that? Okay, well, you're going to go ahead and click on the help button. It'll bring up the create a project link. You click on that, and it'll drive you directly from initiating a project to what information you need to fill out, and that's required, all the way through submitting it. Try It mode enables you to see an online screen that provides you a dummy view into entering all this data. So you can actually enter this step by step. Know It brings you back into your live environment, live Clarity environment, and provides a little video screen in the bottom right-hand corner that will drive you in through the live product how to fill something out, or how to create a project, or how to supply a resource to a task, right? It's going to drive that end user through all those steps, because we know, I mean, how often this happens when you are supplying a new solution to your organization, whether it be PPM, whether it be email, whether it be a new version of Microsoft Office. You may sit through a conference call training session that happened a month ago, and when you're actually utilizing that solution that's been delivered to you, or that application that's been delivered to you, you sit there and you say, wow, I have no recollection of what I was trained on. So this gives them that capability to say, you know what, I remember seeing this, but I want a little bit of help, and this enables them to select how they want to approach it, whether just seeing it off the get-go, whether trying it in a dummy environment, or whether it be allowing you to do it in the live environment itself. So again, streamlining user adoption to make sure that obviously you are getting the best return on your investment by enabling people to work in the solution appropriately and productively. Okay. One thing that's not listed on the screen, there's also capabilities to supply training manuals based on this, so in job checklists. So if you're hiring on a new PM or you're switching roles, you can print out or email them a link to their job checklist. So based on the role, here's the typical functions that you need to do within Clarity, and it's all laid out for them step by step with screenshots. And obviously, from a training perspective, this really minimizes the effort that your training department needs to utilize. Okay. Additionally, this now starts leading into where the industry is going and what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis with the customers that we are working with. So it's really starting to change the way that individuals or business plan works. So typically in the past, yes, executives would set up some type of strategic plan for the year. There may be key goals or initiatives that you need to work on, or objectives that need to be tied back to the work that you're executing on. But typically what we've seen in the past is that there was no way to tie all this together. And this is where that loose handoff would always occur, and it would never be able to roll back up to the business executives to show the value that you're supplying from your PMO or from your new product development organization. Instead, it was always something that was kind of muddled, and you would have to create these reports on a quarterly basis, and you would scramble to do so. Well, now what Clarity enables you to do is to start enabling those business executives to communicate those strategic plans to the individuals that are executing on them. When that execution occurs, Clarity is now enabling better and more efficient ways to prioritize and manage your work based on the constraints that you've identified internally, as well as being able, from a strategic perspective, to execute it on it to enable your team members and development staff and your project managers to execute on these things anywhere they are within the world. So utilizing your smartphones, utilizing your iPads to really start facilitating work within the solution. And the key here is that this should be a perpetual cycle. So whether you're managing these incoming demand versus those strategies on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, yearly basis, is completely up to you. But the great thing about it is that Clarity enables all this to happen within one solution. Okay. So with this in mind, what can Clarity do for you, right? And how can we start utilizing Clarity to define our strategic plans for any time frame, to be able to rank and execute on those projects to achieve those initiatives that are being defined by their executive management? How do we then, as we're executing on those projects, being able to collect time and update statuses from anywhere at any time, and ultimately being able to confirm that our initiatives are being achieved based on the strategies that are being assigned by the executive management. Well, Clarity can start to drive this information with certain aspects of the solution. One thing that Clarity and CA just released, I think it was actually last week, is Clarity Playbook. And Clarity Playbook is an actual downloadable app on your iPad that enables executives to start defining their strategic plans for a given year or month, and then ultimately roll up goals and objectives and initiatives and funding around all those strategic initiatives and rolling up that data back from Clarity into their iPad. So what they're able to do is not having to log on all the time, right? Not having to go to a specific area of their desktop to get the information. Instead, when they're on the road, on the plane, they can go into their Playbook app, not only align and set strategic initiatives, but also have a true roll-up of the cost that's being driven from Clarity. So what we're going to do now is see a quick demo of that. Again, it's not a live demo just because I don't have my iPad connected to my laptop here, but ultimately these individuals can now start clicking into their playbook on their iPad. They can then click on the strategic plans, where they can add as many strategic plans as they want for the year. It could be for a month, it could be for a quarter. Ultimately, within their strategic plan, they're aligning some type of summary and key business drivers to that plan for this given year. Again, you can read this, but ultimately it's driving missions, right? So communicating more effectively with the public, ensure an effective, skilled, productive workforce, execution and compliance with legislative mandates, and so forth. Not exactly things that are unique to every organization, but obviously enabling them to really get a key definition of what their mission is for this given year and how we're going to drive this information. So after that summary is set up, they can then go ahead and establish some goals within their organization. So being able to grow to the business, being able to accelerate innovation and maintain revenue. Within our grow the business goal, I can then start setting up objectives from an executive standpoint. So what are our objectives for this year, and what are our overall initiatives that relate to those objectives? And the key here is that we can now start linking these to direct investments that are stored within Clarity. So for leveraging software as a service applications as well as infrastructure as a service, what are the three investments that are going along with that? So I can click on that initiative, and again, this is all on your iPad. I can see the three projects or investments that are related to that, what the overall cost of those investments are, and who's ultimately managing those, right? So very quickly, I'm able to start now as an executive see how my strategies are being worked on and executed on by our PMs and portfolio teams, but also being able to see how that compares to what we're doing, right? Ultimately, this leads to some funding. So based on each of those initiatives that I've established internally, maybe I have a bucket of $50 million. How do I want to distribute this across the organization? So obviously, if there's key strategic goals that you want to be meeting and key funding initiatives that you have for each of these initiatives, I can then start actually planning those corresponding to the actual budget that's been established by my organization. So ultimately, and you're going to see this on the back end, we're going to be able to start driving some dashboards that will reflect not only what you have planned from a funding perspective, what you have planned from an initiative and goal perspective, but as well being able to tie in the Clarity assets that are being worked on. So now we're driving executives and empowering them to have this information at their fingertips rather than having to wait on reports that are delivered on a quarterly basis or monthly basis that are being supplied from the team. Instead, now they have a real-time data that's aligning to their strategic initiatives and see how the actual status reporting is doing on each of those initiatives that are being worked on within Clarity. Okay. So ultimately, we've been able to take a quick look as how executives are able to define strategic plans for any time frame that they see fit, and ultimately, now it comes time to start tying not only those incoming demand and investments that we are working on to those projects that are coming into Clarity, but also being able to rank and execute on those projects. Okay. So I'm going to go into the live software right now, and what I'm going to do is actually log in as a portfolio manager. So this individual is, whether it's the leader of the PMO, whether it's the leader of the EPMO, doesn't matter. Based on their rights and security, you have the capability to create these portfolios on the fly and really start driving any investments that you want aligning to them. Okay. So what I'm going to do really quickly is just go into our business technologies portfolio and go directly to our waterlines page. What this view provides me is a very quick look into all the work that we are working on and that has been approved or unapproved, and where our waterline is actually being established. Okay. What the Clarity Portfolio Management Solution allows you to do, it allows you to create any constraint-based waterline that you want to. So if your organization is primarily based on driving out planned budget and going against that planned cost that's associated with the portfolio, you can have that as your primary constraint. If you're an organization that's not that financially management mature right now, you can utilize role demand to determine what you should be working on and what's falling above and below the waterline. But the key here is that those goals that we've defined from an organization perspective, each of these incoming investments, whether they be currently in flight with the ones that are already approved or ones that are currently unapproved, we're able to tie specific goals to them. So when we remember, if we looked at what was happening on the playbook side, these goals were initiated by our executive management, and now we're tying key initiatives to them. Okay. So here you're able to now start looking at your portfolio in terms of what, based on our primary constraint, should be occurring within our investment pool, what we should be working on based on our requirements, as well as what is falling below and above the line. If I want to say that, you know what, I think there's actually a required project that has not been established within our waterline, what happens if I were to take this required project and now move it above the line? Where are we going to fall? Well, we see that if we take that project and move it up, we're actually now in a planned cost state that we're over budget. And again, that can be broken out into capital or operating. So now I need to start reprioritizing or reordering this waterline. Maybe if I move this waterline up here to above online order entry, I can see that, you know what, these 3 approved projects that we're currently working on, based on my constraints, we actually need to unapprove these projects or maybe push these out into the future. So based on our prioritization schedules, we're seeing what we should be working on. Additionally, within the new portfolio management solution within Clarity, you have the capability to create plans. So with all these plans, and you can see one of my counterparts was in here before, you can create as many plans as you want. So if this year we want to focus on high ROI and low risk projects, I can actually determine that, you know what, that's great that I can see my portfolio in line as it sits today, but based on my my actual plan of saying I want to focus on high ROI projects and low risk projects, we can see that some of those projects that we were currently working on that were approved state actually don't meet our criteria, and we are now, based on dropping in the high ROI as well as low risk score, we are actually reorganizing and redistributing where we should be focusing our work. Okay. So again, what you're able to do is create all these plans based on your optimization schedules and really start driving out which projects that you should work on and how you should work on those appropriately. And it's up to your organization to make that determination. But the great thing about this is that Clarity gives you that foresight now into, based on what we are trying to focus on this year from a goal perspective, from an ROI perspective, based on those requirements that I've supplied, these are the projects that I should be working on, and all the ones that are falling behind the line do not meet those requirements. So we either need to now have a negotiated communication with the project managers of these investments, or have these project investments pushed out so all these cost dollars may be falling into the last month of the year and whatnot. There's additional views, and again, I can go into all these tabs, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to. There's an additional view here that you can get around those capacities. So based on that plan and the water line that we're following above, based on those 8 projects, here's the schedule we are looking at. Here's the costs and the roll demand that we are seeing. I can also see a breakdown by role of where we are actually going over capacity to facilitate that work. So I can see that from an architect perspective and even from a developer perspective, we're having major issues in August. So this might lead us to look at, okay, well, what happens if I were to take some of these projects and push them out to the future? So if we look at our e-commerce portal project, we can see that this started actually in April. If I were to actually take this project and actually move it further out into the future, maybe we move this to actually December instead of actually starting in April. I can actually see, based on this change that I'm going to supply, we're going to push out some of this roll demand. We can see we're at 4,600 hours right now. When I change the start time, it's going to automatically change the finish time as well. So instead of it finishing in November, it's now going to finish in July of the following year. So I've effectively removed 4,000 hours of work for our given portfolio year. I can see now I'm below my roll demand for the given year. And as I scroll down, we can see that our developer is still getting hit in August, so there's some other projects that we're working on that may be affecting that individual. But I can see now I've pushed off that work effectively into the following fiscal year. So Clarity not only enables you to see a true roll-up of all those projects, whether they be agile or waterfall-based, into one portfolio view, but it also enables you to now start mixing and matching and really starting to tentatively schedule around which projects you're working on to see the impact that it can have on your investment pool. But understand, since I'm pushing this project out, I might be able to get another project in the mix now because we're way under budget, we're now under roll demand, and now I can start scheduling appropriately. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move this back to our original date of April. But what I can now start seeing is how I can start playing with and modifying this information. Additionally, we have views where you can compare and contrast these plans against your current in-flight work to see what is falling out and above the waterline. But ultimately, once these objectives are met, that's where your PMs can start executing on these projects. So if we look at our e-commerce portal project, I can go to that Gantt chart as a PM now and start now executing. So if there's things that have changed, if my project has been pushed out by a couple of months, what I can actually do is take a look at my current existing plan of work here and push out start and finish dates. Or maybe, you know what, I realize that there's new tasks that I need to add, right? So if I need to add a new task, I can directly within this project interface just go ahead and say, insert, and I can create a new web portal interface. I can supply a given resource to this task. And again, based on you typing ahead, you'll get a view of who's in the system that I can select from, and then ultimately start scheduling it. If I wanted to, I can do it via the start and finish dates, or I can actually utilize the drag and drop capabilities of our Gantt chart. So one thing new to Clarity 13 is the capability to do online scheduling. So if you remember in the integration side, we still have direct ties to Microsoft Project and Open Workbench, but now Clarity is enabling online scheduling. So all those PMs can facilitate the work in the one view, within the one source of truth of the Clarity solution, rather than having to depend on other online schedulers to facilitate their work. Additionally, within the project itself, you can supply risk factors, you can supply financial cost metrics, you can supply process control to really govern that project and where it's going. But ultimately, what this now starts doing is enabling you to start now automatically reporting on these. Okay, so based on that work that I'm supplying at the PM level, I can give views in all the KPIs based on our project type. So whether they're application changes, infrastructure deployment, or major projects I'm working on, I can see all the issues, risks, and change controls that are in place, as well as how we're performing on status, schedule, alignment, and risk. Maybe from an executive standpoint, I want to see a true listing of all the top 50 projects that I'm working on, that my team is working on. I can actually go in the top 50 project watch list, see all the top 50 projects that we are currently working on that are effectively going back to the goals that I've established from a strategic standpoint. And based on selecting the specific checkboxes, I can see the ones that, you know what, are highly aligned to our organization, but are actually scheduled to be late, right? And this will automatically start filtering down that top 50 project watch list. So I can now start making determination as to what I need to do. Maybe I need to contact this PM and have them reschedule, or maybe supply more resources to this given project to get it back on track. Or, really start enabling them to make effective decisions based on the information that they're being supplied. And lastly, there's project status reports. Again, I had mentioned that there's roughly over 30 plus crystal reports that come out of the box. There's also hundreds of portlets that come out of the box. If I wanted to get a typical project storyboard report, I can click on which project I'm viewing and get an up-to-date status on every KPI that you deem appropriate within that project. So I can see how we're performing on schedule, how we're performing on our scope and cost and effort. And I can start now driving this information on a real-time basis instead of creating reports that are obsolete the second they are generated. Okay. So ultimately, what does this do? So we've effectively ranked and executed our projects, right, by going into the waterline view, being able to establish what our constraints are, whether they are by costs or role demand, again, is up to you. Additionally, being able to set up plans to start driving out your key factors in optimizing your portfolio. So if it's, based on your goals that are being supplied by executive management, based if it's being on required projects or high alignment, low risk projects, again, completely up to you. And the key here, and I didn't mention this before, which I should have, is that any attribute or any information that you're putting on a given project or investment can be utilized to optimize against. So if you want priority as your mechanism, if you want some other attribute that your organization uses that's specific to you, if that's created or configured within Clarity, again, you can use that to drive your optimization schedules. And ultimately, what this does is it enables those individuals to execute on those projects that you've ranked and prioritized in a simple user interface that enables them to communicate via SharePoint and have overall reporting and dashboards that roll up regardless of what type of execution model that you're performing. So whether that's Agile or Waterfall, again, that enables the PMs to do their work, facilitate the data that needs to be delivered, and then ultimately rolling those up into the out-of-the-box reports and dashboards that can be supplied to your user community or your executive team. Okay. And again, we showed you the Gantt, but again, online scheduler is completely available to you, drag and drop interface, as well as those out-of-the-box reports and portlets that you can utilize internally. Okay. Here's an example of one of those crystal reports with the project stories dashboard. And again, I think this is it needs to be mentioned. Typically these reports get our customers to 85 to 95% of the way there, and they just have some specific changes that are specific to their organization that are made to these out-of-the-box reports. But again, it's enabling you not to have to reinvent the wheel and starting from scratch. And all of these reports and dashboards that we provide you out of the box are delivered from an aspect of our user communities. So these are things that have been suggested or used by our customer base over the past 30 years. And they're not something that a random person in development or product management on the CA side is devising that this would work for the solution. These are all driven by our customer base and have been vetted out accordingly. Okay. So we've defined our strategic plans at the executive level utilizing CA Playbook on their iPad. We've ranked and executed on our projects from a portfolio manager perspective as well as a PM perspective. Well, how can we start enabling these team members or these developers to start supplying time and cost to these projects. Well, we are now giving them the capability to utilize the CA Clarity Time Manager application that's available on their iPhone or iPad. And this is simply just going out to iTunes, downloading it, and now they have a clear-cut view into what their timesheet is, where they can supply all their given hours for the given tasks that they're working on those projects. So whether they be an Agile project, whether they be a waterfall project, it's all incorporated in here. You can also see that there is a tile for approvals, and what that will do is enable those PMs or resource managers to appropriately, whether it's over the weekend or wherever they are outside of work, to go and review those timesheets by their individuals, being able to then approve them, and those actuals will be represented within the project plans themselves. So again, providing more mobility to our user community so they can do their job anywhere they are within the world and not have to be tied to a laptop or desktop to facilitate their work. Again, it's completely web-based, so all these tie-ins are enabled for them and providing mobility to execute on their project work accordingly. Okay. So we've appropriately defined our strategic plans, raked and executed on our projects and investments that have come into Clarity. We've enabled our team members or developers to supply time and updates via their phone. Again, that capability is still in core Clarity, but again, we're now promoting that mobility. Now it's time to confirm that our initiatives are achieving our strategy. So going back to Playbook and the dashboards view, the executive can now see how all those tied-in investments that are happening in Clarity and being managed from a project manager perspective are now tying back directly to their overall goal completion, objective completion, and initiative spend tracking, if you will. So here they're getting an automatic roll-up. They can go on here anytime they want, click on their dashboards, and see all that information and how it's rolling up from within Clarity and how it's being executed on. So if there's issues with their goal completion, right, and their specific goals are not being met based on the completion, or their major goal for this year of maybe cost reduction is all at risk, right, with 33% of those investments are at risk, we need to start now driving communication and negotiation around getting those projects back on track to make sure that our goals are completed and managed appropriately. Additionally, all of these dashboards can be drillable, so if I wanted to click on our spend summary, I can get more details around that. So where each of our goals are, what the objectives are, initiatives are, and ultimately how those investments are rolling up from a cost perspective and whatnot, and what the status is of those. So again, very intuitive for our executive level team to utilize. They can now start not only manipulating what the strategy they're driving is, but also being able to real-time report on what the work is being facilitated on. Okay, so again, it's a complement to those typical reports that are generated for them quarterly or annually. Okay. So we've appropriately gone through the governance life cycle of defining those strategies, being able to execute and rank those projects that align to those strategies, being able to collect time and execute on those projects through our mobile devices, and being able to show some type of value back to our executives to make sure that they're aligning not only their strategies to the investments, but also aligning their spend to those investments that are actually driving what their strategies are for the given year. So how does this deliver to our consumer base? Well, what we've now done is that we've realized that typically 95%, and again, that's kind of an arbitrary number, but the majority of our customers are having these typical issues within their organization, and these are the typical starting points that we see within our customer base as they're implementing. So I need to be able to align resources to products, need productivity with immediate results, so I need to get some type of status reporting out of the system from the get-go, as well as being able to meet our budget pressures from our executive group and budgetary constraints with the most efficient and beneficial projects that our customer that we can deliver to our customer base. So this is typically what we see happening, and all this needs to occur with really one holistic solution that's a single source of truth. So no matter what these objectives are for your organization, regardless if you're in finance, regardless if you're a project manager or an IT director or a program manager, you all need to be gathering this information in one area So it can all be not only worked and executed on, but also reported on and established as really the critical mass point for all of your information around your PPM needs. Okay? And what this does is that Clarity provides a code, it's called Code 50. It's really a rapid implementation model that will deliver you out of the box content, structure around your key needs. So if it's resources, we get you aligned to resources. If it's project management, we get you aligned to project management. If it's time entry and overall cost around a portfolio, we get you aligned to that in a 4-week structured implementation schedule. And then after that occurs, your goals, your pace, determine what you add on to the solution. So if you recall when I showed that slide in the beginning of the holistic nature of Clarity, from driving demand, driving portfolio management and ranking, driving execution, and then ultimately status reporting, you can then start utilizing additional aspects of the solution after this initial ramp up is completed. But what this is doing is providing you a solution in a very quick manner that enables you to pinpoint your specific value adds out of the box. We deliver on those, get quick wins, get user adoption, and then ultimately, as you start seeing the benefits and the end users start seeing the accountability and value add that they have by supplying their work, you can then start now accelerating your foundation and really start accelerating what type of additional functionality that you want to include. So if you start off with resources and then you're working on that, getting your resources tied to projects and approvals being met, and then you realize, okay, well now we're ready to start executing on portfolios, right? You can then start executing on portfolio management based on an accelerated growth model. But the key here is that it's all related to your goals within your organization, and it's worked on your pace, not a vendor coming in and saying, here's everything, you figure out what you need. Instead, it's very pinpointed, and you can do now a crawl, walk, run approach. Okay. So with that, we have gone through how to define our strategies, how to rank and execute, how to provide mobility to your end users, how to actually confirm the status of all those projects and efforts that you are managing within your solution, while talking about how it is delivered and the backing that CA Clarity provides you from a standpoint of not only execution and development, but also from the industry perspective with Gartner. Okay. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Becky. I appreciate your time today.
Unmuted.
Becky, you should be good to go.
Once again, I would like to thank you for tuning in to the webcast today. We hope that you found today's presentation to be informative, educational, and insightful about the CA Clarity PPM tool. If you have any questions about the presentation, feel free to contact Stacy Hurley or myself for any questions. That wraps up the A&I Solutions webcast on CA Clarity Project and Portfolio Management. A&I Solutions would like to thank Jason for participating as the guest speaker. Also, we would like to take this time to thank everyone involved in the webinar from CA Technologies and A&I Solutions. Have a great day.